A sniper can't have his eye up on the scope all day long. So how are we going to get across? Go!
You've got to constantly make sure that the scenarios are realistic.
So keep your eyes open.
And also they're challenging. And there's ways that people can find their agency in every scenario, whatever that may be. And that's something they sometimes have to discover for themselves.
Being that this is a male-dominated field, I certainly felt pressure to do well, which made me work harder. I recognized that many times when I enter the room, I'm the only female or I'm the only person of color in the room. And certainly I put pressure on myself.
The kitchen is a stressful, hot, chaotic place. To kind of go from that to a very quiet greenhouse in the country with just me and the snails, yeah, it's been wonderful.
Come on, everybody, keep coming. Go, 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 go.
Do what you're told.
It was actually my first time ever doing a training like this. My name is Varsha Thibault, and I work for the Eleanor Kirk Foundation. Because of all these blended modules that they had, they gave us techniques on how to relax yourself, calm yourself down, and in what moments can you reach for help.
Yeah, I do. I know you. I know you.
Phones. Everything! My name is Frank Smythe. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Journalist Security, GJS. I was working for the Committee to Protect Journalists in the 2000s, and during the Iraq War, the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, a number of journalists were killed by firing, including by U.S. forces. And there was an organization that was founded in London called the International News Safety Institute. I worked with the Committee to Protect Journalists to have me serve on the board of that London group representing CPJ to make sure we had a voice. And that allowed me to get a front row seat on the program of providing training to journalists. And I raised the question that 3 out of 4 local journalists around the world are getting murdered outright, not dying in combat or in stepping on a landmine or been an airstrike, but being murdered outright.
Give them a little, little bit. Don't drag them to the ground.
By the end of the decade, I decided it was time to start my own organization to provide a different kind of training, building on the work that others had done, especially former British military personnel, providing hostile environments and emergency first aid training for civilians and in particular journalists. This didn't exist back when I went to El Salvador, for instance, in the 80s. I got certified as an EMT because it was the only training available. So I appreciate what our predecessors did, but we started looking at it with a different approach, incorporating emotional self-care into the training and stress management.
What's going on inside my brain, inside my body.
In a way that hadn't been done before. Incorporating digital safety. And what browser to use for sensitive research, right? Because some browsers are safer than others, so we're going to see that. Because by the 2010s, it was clear that digital safety was becoming a major aspect of security, which has only increased. And addressing things like sexual assault, which hadn't really been on the radar of hostile environments training before, and how to do that appropriately in a way that would be supportive of women entering the workforce and continuing to act as journalists on the front lines of conflicts, and at the same time trying to find ways to keep everybody as safe as possible.
Funny? You think this is funny?
No.
Because this isn't funny because you feel like you can just intrude on my space here.
I was feeling a little more sympathetic towards you in the sense that I was listening because you were like, oh my God, leave or something like that. So I was like, oh, I'm understanding you. In my head, I was like applying that lesson, understanding where they're coming from, things like that. That was probably stupid. But so is that a good tactic to have in this kind of situation or what?
Kind of what we're talking about here when my, body like shaky or like voices changing, you know, and again, it's paying attention to your gut too. So here we're giving you all like little tools, like planting little seeds, because you're going to be the one in the moment that's going to then make the best decision for you. My name is Angela Meyer. I am the GJS Empowerment Director. We're putting, you know, the clients through real life scenarios. I told you and your group that it is not safe to be here. You know, they know are not real, but physiologically it can feel real. I'm gonna get you fired. That's a promise. Soldiers, let's go. So oftentimes, you know, people get triggered from past experiences. So I'm the one that is then sitting with them, kind of counseling them, if you will, for those next steps. Awareness of how you are in the moment, physically, mentally, emotionally, and soulfully, is power.
Then you've got the detonator here. I'm Paul Burton, the training director for GGS. We only have 3 days to teach things. Okay, we've got a mortar round on the right. So we've got to whittle it down and only teach what they really need and what they can remember. To your right. And then they remember it, and then they can use it. Unless there's a life-threatening problem here, like she's in a burning car or something.
That was amazing. And this is probably the most useful exercise all of us could do, because the chances of the car accident on the road in those countries is...
I mean, I really didn't know that if you bleed out, you're dead in three minutes. And that massive bleeding through the arteries is something that absolutely has to be taken care of first.
You do not go out there and get shot. So the first sound is the bullet just missing you.
My name is Wataru Namiki, and I'm working for Japanese TV station based in Tokyo. I have a chance to go to Israel in future, so I imagine the most situation where some really excited people will gather around and then how I had better to act. So it's a great lesson for me.
A sniper can't have his eye up on the scope all day long. So how are we going to get across? Go!
You've got to constantly make sure that the scenarios are realistic.
So keep your eyes open.
And also they're challenging.
Okay, the vehicle is immobilized, it's stopped, everybody out.
And there's ways that people can find their agency in every scenario, whatever that may be. And that's something they sometimes have to discover for themselves, I think. How much they can find and how much agency they have.
Just tell them, I know it's gonna hurt, but I want to raise your leg and put it up on your knee.
Okay, I'm gonna raise your leg.
All right.
Okay.
Instead of freezing in the moment and not knowing what to do, this exercise or this course has actually helped me to breathe in and just spur into action at the moment. So I'm grateful for that.
Can we stay sitting in the vehicle? No, the bullets are going to go straight the way through. So we got to get out. Okay, you can get up beyond this side of the building.
Is something blocking your airway?
My name is Indre Sabalunaite. I work with the Marshall Legacy Institute. Our mission is to help countries help themselves recover from conflict, primarily by accelerating landmine clearance operations. The course definitely helped to prepare me for some unexpected maybe situation that would happen, and I think just increasing the situational awareness, just to always be present and to know, to watch for the surroundings, how to travel safely, what to do in an emergency, and so forth.
I think what we're trying to do is teach people similar habits and protocols that'll help them stay safe and maintain an awareness in what is increasingly a difficult and more dangerous environments, both at home and abroad.
I always tell cadets, because they always ask, what do I need to do to be successful? And I always say, learn your craft, master your craft.
During the pandemic, I received Lifetime Achievement Award from President Biden for the community service that I have been providing. I have always been teaching free classes.
Namaskar.
Good morning. Namaskar. Thank you.
So it will look something like this. You make a fist first.
Again inhale, arms up. My name is Shrikant Sabnis. I am 71 years old. I am from India originally, from Pune. And relax. Let's do a few jumping jacks. Fantastic. Some people think that only the spiritual aspect of yoga is what is the real yoga. I feel that the social aspects help in their physical well-being as well as the spiritual well-being. So this is part of the service that Sri Yoga is providing.
My name is Amanda Azubike. I am the Deputy Commanding General for Cadet Command, and in the summer I serve as the Commandant for Cadet Summer Training. Well, first of all, I never thought I would be here. I get asked all the time about becoming a general. Never did I ever. So the day that I received my star, I really felt honored. I recognize the gravity of this moment. I recognize the responsibility, the expectations, as well as the scrutiny that comes with this promotion. I also recognize the power of representation and the importance of diverse teams. It was a bittersweet moment for me because neither one of my parents are living. So you certainly think about all the people that help you get there, and generally speaking, at the top of the list, it's always family.
I am extremely proud of her. It was probably the most amazing moment in my life experiencing a family member's achievement.
Amanda I. Azubike is authorized and directed to wear the uniform.
We had a lot of family members there to see it, but you know, my mom not seeing this moment of having this daughter that is an immigrant, that's Zimbabwean and Nigerian, that makes it to general. Like, these are things in American history you read in textbooks.
My mom is from Zimbabwe. My dad is Nigerian, so my last name is Igbo, and it means strength. I was born and raised in London, England, and I have a sister. My parents were educated in London, and that's where they met. My mom became a nurse. My dad became a lawyer. After my mom and dad divorced, so we moved to the States with my mom. She was a nurse. They were recruiting nurses in the U.S. I was 14. My sister was 12. And we had no family in the U.S. And we moved to Arkansas. So I went to high school. I went to junior high, high school, and college in Arkansas. Growing up with my sister, my mom was very strict and very focused on education. So we both were raised to work hard and do well. We also had a really great role model in our mom, in that she really instilled in us that if you work hard, you really can achieve anything. And so we both really worked hard. My sister knew that she wanted to be a doctor from a very young age. And so that was kind of her trajectory. I started off in Air Force Junior ROTC in high school, which is what put the military bug in my ear. And so when I applied for college, not being a U.S. citizen, I was looking for a way to pay for college. And so I enlisted in the Army, and I actually was back then they called it a nuclear biological chemical specialist. Once I got back from training, I went to college, and in college, I found out about ROTC, which is Reserve Officer Training Corps, we are the headquarters for ROTC, U.S. Army Cadet Command, and decided that I was going to become an officer. And so that's what I did. Your junior years, when you prioritize what it is you want to do in the Army, and aviation was my top choice, and I was selected for Army Aviation. And so when I graduated a year later, I went on to flight school.
She also was very, very athletic and didn't play high school or college sports. So the military sort of was a great fit for her to sort of develop that athleticism as well as the discipline, as well as having the opportunity to become an officer and a pilot.
I met General Azubuike while at the gym working out in Fort Jackson. And when I walked into the gym, she was one of the most physically fit people that I saw in the gym. I walked over and I spoke to her and I said, "Hey, who are you?" And we introduced ourselves, and I found out she was from Nigeria as well. So we became friends instantly, and we've been friends for over 22 years. Yeah, awesome.
But it's been a good summer.
Yes.
Joining Army was through my JROTC program in high school.
General Azubuike is absolutely just a phenomenal leader and a role model for all of our cadets and for our Army. Every summer we run cadet summer training. We train 10,000 cadets in 100 days. And so 8,000 of them, come through here. You go from the beginning of June all the way through the mid-August, where we train them in the basic soldier skills on how to be a soldier. And then we give them lots of opportunities in leadership positions to hone their responsibility to be leaders, whether that's in our Army or outside of our Army. And that's what she does for the summer. And she runs all of that for the Army in what is the largest training exercise that the Army runs each and every year. And so it takes a phenomenal leader to be able to do that. And Amanda is exactly that.
Just a reminder to everybody, we are going to be getting some...
Being that this is a male-dominated field, I certainly felt pressure to do well, which made me work harder. I recognize that many times when I enter the room, I'm the only female or I'm the only person of color in the room. And certainly I put pressure on myself.
What it took for Amanda Azubuike to get to the pinnacle of her career where she is right now, it is really just, it is hard work, it is leadership in it, but it's really just the engaging personality that she has and her ability to communicate and engage with soldiers.
I think what's made me successful is the hard work. I was not necessarily the smartest person. I was an AB student, but I really work hard. I always tell cadets, because they always ask, what do I need to do to be successful? And I always say, learn your craft, master your craft, because once you master your craft, it gives you, you're competent for one, but that gives you confidence. And you need that confidence in order to lead others. And once your soldiers see that you're competent and confident, they'll begin to trust you. And you want that trust.
I want to change the narrative.
I see what representation does for those coming up. I have people coming up to me all the time, especially females and especially minorities, because for so long they haven't seen someone that either looks like them or is different, right? And so I recognize that. And so I feel extremely blessed and privileged to be in this position because I get to see young people and talk to young people who aspire to be in the military and do great things every day.
Seeing the general just excel in every way possible shows and that there isn't as many obstacles as there were before for people like us. I feel like a lot of the time people don't understand how representation matters, and just having her in that space or in that position where a little African child or any girl can look up and say, if she can do it, I definitely can.
General Azubike is absolutely just a phenomenal leader and a role model for all of our cadets and for our Army.
I am extremely proud of her for many different reasons. I think it's such an amazing achievement, and I'm always enamored by women or women of color achieving great things. And I'm always like, my sister's a general. My sister's a general. She created her legacy, something that, you know, she and our heritage can always be proud of. And it is so amazing and so deserving. I started in the Army strictly because I needed money for school, but I stayed in the Army because of the opportunities and the people. They paid for both of my master's degrees. I've traveled all over the world. I've met different people, and you really get a sense of pride serving in the military. It's something that's bigger than yourself. It's just been a great opportunity, and I also feel like this country has given so much to me and my family. It's a way of paying back.
The snail farming came about just a realization that there was a gap in the market. I was a chef full-time back in 2013 and wanted to put snails on my menu. And at the time I was taking a lot of care to source my ingredients locally and ethically and responsibly and make sure they were, you know, the best that they could possibly be. And I wanted to do a snail dish, an escargot dish. And so I started looking to see if I could find some snails for this dish, and all I could find were canned or frozen snails. All of it, canned and frozen, were both coming from Europe or Asia. We are the only USDA certified snail farm in the country. We got our approval from them in 2015, and we work closely with them on all the things that keep the local agriculture safe, because they are an invasive pest that could do a lot of damage to, you know, the surrounding agriculture. Once we had the snails, it was a whole new process of figuring out how to raise them inside of a greenhouse. The flavor of the snails is affected depending on what you feed them, and for that reason we're very careful with what we're finishing them on, because we know it's going to become a prominent flavor profile in the finished product. So we're literally kind of the last 2 weeks of their life seasoning them from the inside out, but more often than not it's herbs that would be more palatable to a human you know, interest. So things like basil, parsley, tarragon, mint. Getting people to try snails for the first time is a big, you know, part of our business, because we are living in America and it's not something that people have been eating here for years and years like they have in other countries. I have made the switch from full-time chef to full-time farmer. I still do some cooking at our pop-up, Paw Paw, but most of my time is spent with the snails, and it has been very relaxing. The kitchen is a stressful, hot, chaotic place, and so to kind of go from that to a very quiet greenhouse in the country with, you know, just me and the snails that aren't making any noises, it's been wonderful. What I love about snail farming, I think, is seeing the entire process. Being full-time chef, I was only kind of catching the product at its end stage, the very end of it, where, you know, it was coming to me maybe from a farmer, and I was, you know, preparing it and sending it out to be eaten. With this, you're literally seeing life being born, you're seeing these snails hatching and growing and getting bigger. You're taking care of them, you're making sure they're healthy and they're happy. And then you're creating a product, really quality, something you can, that I'm proud of, and then kind of passing it off along to the chef.
I've been coming out here every year since I was born. It's kind of in my blood. I love being in the boat. I love the water, love boats. I love fishing, and the money's great too.
Bristol Bay is known as one of the top producing wild salmon industries in the world, and it has always had a really good reputation.
I really hope that diversity, especially in children's books, becomes just normal, not something we have to talk about, that it is just something that happens and it's in everyday life.
Welcome to the Tavernier Nursery. This is the largest ocean-based nursery in the world, and it is the largest nursery that we have. It is home to 500 trees, which is about 30,000 corals at full capacity. There's nowhere else in the world that you can swim through a living forest of coral like you can in this nursery. There is just one of them. We have multiple nurseries. Together they hold 50,000 corals, and this is our biggest, making up 30,000 of them.
Kids experience a lot of emotions and feelings that a lot of times they don't know how to process or don't know how to talk about. I started Starlight Yoga because I wanted to give kids the tools they need to help them build self-confidence, help them deal with their feelings, and learn how to take deep breaths through meditation and mindfulness.
I see a great big lion. Let's see if we can scare the lion away with a great big roar.
Children are extremely compassionate by nature, and the more that we teach them to take a break and pause and think about what you're doing, I believe that they'll just grow up and be stronger, healthier individuals, mentally, emotionally, physically.
This week on The Inside Story, a free press matters. The Israel-Hamas war becomes the most deadly conflict for media in history. Burmese journalists in exile reporting on Myanmar 3 years after a military coup. A Nigerian news outlet with a fresh look at the humanitarian costs of war. And reporters turned war crimes investigators get first-hand accounts of Russian atrocities in Ukraine. Now, on The Inside Story, journalism and conflicts.
Welcome to The Inside Story, a free press matters. I'm VOA Press Freedom Editor Jessica Dorit in our New York studios. This week, we're taking a close look at the dangers journalists face on the front lines of conflict and the lengths they go to cover vitally important stories. We begin with the Israel-Hamas war. Egyptian, Israeli and Qatari officials met in Cairo on Tuesday in an attempt to reach a deal to stop the fighting in Gaza. This after an Israeli raid resulted in the safe return of 2 hostages, but killed 67 Palestinians, some of them civilians in Rafah. And as the Israeli military prepares for what could be a major offensive in that southern city. Around 1.4 million people have fled to Rafah to escape fighting in Gaza. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says he holds out hope an offensive there can be avoided.
My sincere hope is that the negotiations for the release of hostages and some form of cessation of hostilities to be successful, to avoid a all-out offensive over Rafah, where the core of the humanitarian system is located, and that would have devastating consequences.
Media covering the conflict must navigate restrictions on access and serious risks to personal safety. From Jerusalem, here's Celia Mendoza.
Covering the West Bank has always had its challenges for Palestinian and Israeli journalists. But since the October 7 Hamas terror attack and Israel's counteroffensive, conditions are increasingly dangerous.
It's dangerous for all the journalists, not only for Al Jazeera journalists. But it seems that we are paying the high price because we are very active and we're trying to cover everything inside the Gaza, even in the dangerous areas.
Some journalists say reporting on the military operations by either side has always been restricted.
In general, it's challenging to cover military operations in the West Bank. In general, even before October 7th. Especially for Palestinian journalists, but also for Israeli journalists. Israeli journalists can hardly go into areas that are controlled by the Palestinian Authority.
Reporting from the West Bank possesses a set of unique risks, including attacks by Israeli settlers and Israeli and Palestinian law enforcement.
I released the stickers that I am from my car because it is target for the Israeli army, and it is target for the settlers to attack any car for press.
Before the latest conflict, Bakr had been criticized for his activism and anti-Israel comments. The Israeli government denies targeting journalists. A Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson told VOA via email that almost half of the journalists killed were actually terrorists. But the media watchdog, the Committee to Protect Journalists, has confirmed over 85 journalists killed in the first 4 months of the war, nearly all Palestinian. Free movement has also decreased in the region, with checkpoints and restrictions on access in the West Bank.
They targeting the Palestinian journalists. They will targeting also his family. and they will complicate the life for them.
Some Palestinian journalists are setting up emergency plans to help teams working under conflict conditions. For Israeli journalists, however, the focus is on the hostages Hamas still holds and the terror attack that left 1,200 dead. For Israeli media, says Saragusti, there is an expectation from audiences of patriotism in their coverage.
I can tell you that the audience really want the journalists to rally around the flag, and they don't want to see any criticism. They are not open and cannot contain any human stories coming from the other side. Now they cannot contain, too much details about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They don't care. They don't want to hear about it. They're still very much concentrated on the devastation after October 7th.
That coverage differs from the international media. With the IDF controlling who can enter Gaza, those journalists are requesting independent access to report on the war. Celia Mendoza, VOA News, Jerusalem.
A journalist's ability to witness conflict firsthand and speak with those directly affected is an essential part of the media's role as watchdog. In Ukraine, reporters are using their skills to document evidence of war crimes. Here's Anna Chernikova in Kyiv.
The Reckoning Project aims to be a game changer in the world of human rights and investigative journalism. Co-founded by Janine Di Giovanni, a human rights reporter and investigator in conflict zones, the project fights for justice and accountability in times of war, in the court of public opinion and the courts of law.
I've always worked in conflict zones, war zones, or the aftermath of war, and I've always taken testimonies of survivors. Someone has to keep a record of that. I think all wars and all places where people suffer should be treated equally.
The Reckoning Project combines advocacy and journalism, training reporters and researchers to record, collect, and conserve witness statements and testimonies so that they can be used in legal cases. That means, among other things, that reporters must ask non-leading questions and not coach witnesses they speak with on how to answer. The journalists are not affiliated with any court system and receive support from foundations and non-profits. The interviews sometimes feature in news reports, but Di Giovanni says there is a bigger purpose.
In the short term, working with prosecutors, working with advocacy, putting pressure on the UN or governments, in the long term to keep a lasting memorial of what happened.
2 years into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the project is laying the groundwork for future war crimes trials. Natalia Gumenyuk leads a Kyiv-based team focused on talking with survivors and witnesses to war crimes.
So everybody to whom we talk potentially are eligible to speak at court. In the cooperation with international analysts and lawyers, we developed this methodology to where what they say is not just the journalistic material, but also can be used as evidence for the prosecutors, for the law enforcement in Ukraine and abroad.
An important task is to prove that certain war crimes are not an aberration, but part of a pattern perpetrated by the Russian army. Moscow denies carrying out atrocities, even as the UN documents Russian tactics causing over 10,000 civilian deaths, its abduction of hundreds, possibly thousands of children, and use of rape as a weapon.
We see that the same commanders are still, shelling the rockets indiscriminately into the civilian infrastructure, into the train station, houses, shopping malls, and things like that. And they act the same way. They torture the people. They electrocute them the very same way in Berdyansk and in Kherson, in Kakhovka, and as it was in Izum.
With the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants for Russian President Vladimir Putin and the US unsealing war crimes charges against Russian military personnel, the work of the Reckoning Project and others is likely to play an important role in future hearings. Anna Chernikova, VOA News, Kyiv.
Now we go to Nigeria, where Timothy Obiezo has been speaking with journalists at Humango. The media outlet is filling a gap in conflict reporting by giving those affected by extremist groups a voice.
You have been documenting and reporting on the humanitarian cost of a long-standing conflict in Nigeria, and many times even speaking with Boko Haram survivors. And anyone could wonder, why does this area of journalism interest you?
Thank you very much. Human Angle is the brainchild of Ahmed Saud Kida, who is a front runner when it comes to documenting the Boko Haram crisis. He was at the front lines when the crisis began, when it spilled, and even before it became violent. He was one of the earliest people signaling the crisis. And over the years, he realized that there was a huge vacuum in reporting violence generally, conflict, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. And so in March 2020, he established the platform, Human Angle, to fill that gap.
Tell us about challenges with access to information from authorities.
There are stories we want to tell that people would be very reluctant to talk to you because they fear for their safety, and which is rational, again, because we live in an environment where clamped down by the authorities are not uncommon.
What role, in your opinion, should the media play in helping understand conflict and giving the people a voice?
What I think is maybe even of utmost importance is the fact that there's a platform that is for the people, the victims of war, the victims of underdevelopment, the victims of humanitarian crisis. A platform that is not just there to break the news and share the statistics, but that is interested in getting the entire gamut of their experiences and sharing that with the world as genuinely as possible. And that's also quite important for us. And then, of course, there's also, drawing attention to a lot of things that are getting underreported. But if there's one thing that we've seen in Nigeria, it is that conflict spreads like wildfire if care is not taken. And so people also need to show interest and be concerned and hold their leaders accountable.
Kunle Adebajo, Investigations Editor at Human Angle, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Now in Myanmar, where we also see repressive conditions for the media 3 years on from the coup. The junta takeover wiped out a decade of press freedom gains, watchdogs say, forcing many outlets to relocate. We caught up with some of those journalists to hear how they keep news getting in and out of the country.
On the third anniversary of Myanmar's coup, the streets of the country's largest city, Yangon, are quiet, save for a military presence. Citizens are encouraged to stay inside for a silent protest. But in the country's north, a resistance movement is fighting back. The fighting has displaced millions of civilians, including journalists at Democratic Voice of Burma, or DVB. But from newsrooms outside of Myanmar, they keep reporting. Exile is not new for DVB, founded in 1992 in Norway under prior junta rule. The broadcaster moved to Myanmar during civilian rule, only to have to flee again in 2021. But experience hasn't made the job easier.
It's harder, in fact, because we had to rebuild everything, almost like from the scratch. What I call it, we have to flee, we have to regroup, and we have to rebuild.
With access to independent news restricted in Myanmar, DVB and other media now working from exile play a vital role.
I think the media become a crucial, countering fake news and also countering propaganda, telling the truth about the situation on the ground.
To get news on the conflict, DVB relies on a large network of citizen journalists on the ground, without whom it says it is nearly impossible to get verified information. In Thai cities like Chiang Mai, some news outlets use exile as a shield. Frontier Myanmar's team takes on stories that are harder to cover inside the country, but nothing is guaranteed.
We have all the security protocols, online, offline,
and personal security protocols that we follow. And we've been very careful whatever move that we make. But then, people get arrested for the, unexpectedly, right?
Mementos and photographs adorn Frontier's walls, a reminder of its work's importance. And awards are also displayed at DVB, small reminders of the lives and loved ones left behind.
We try not to communicate with our family member inside Burma, because that can be a trace. So we cut off all the contact with our immediate family member.
Despite the hardships, Frontier's team has a clear focus.
I think our job is to monitor what is going on, especially after 3 years of coup. We want to keep our eyes and ears open and basically report everything.
From exile, these outlets remain a key source of independent news. For VOA News in Thailand, Arash Arabasadi.
Closer to home, our colleague Christina Casada-Smith caught up with Corinne Dufka, a photojournalist who covered wars for more than a decade, from El Salvador to Mogadishu and beyond. Here, Dufka explains in her own words the power of photography and the important role of journalists during conflict.
One feels a lot of power as a photojournalist because your images are seen all over the world and by influential policy makers. So it was, I felt like there was the potential to impact the world in a really meaningful way. And to do it through a combination of what moves the heart because of the emotion that is communicated through photography, as well as intellectually because of what the photo means. I was a photojournalist for about a dozen years in the 80s and 90s, and I specialized in armed conflict and war photography. When one starts looking at the pictures in my book, one doesn't have to get far to see that the majority of them portray the impact of conflict on the civilian population. In El Salvador, as well as the other conflicts, the other 8 conflicts that are covered in my book, I really tried to use people's faces and their expressions to communicate the horror of what they were seeing. One picture that has impacted me is a picture of families as they were observing an exhumation of their family member who had been abducted by the death squads. So this book, first and foremost, was a part of my own personal journey to come to terms with the tumultuous decade plus that I covered. It was also important at that time to recognize the role that we played. Our job, our role, which was a really important one, was to communicate to the outside world what was happening at that time, to raise alarm bells in state capitals, to inform the public and policymakers about a conflict. I went from conflict to Sierra Leone, DRC, Liberia, Sudan, from conflict to conflict to conflict. And I burned out, and that was evident in a sense of dehumanization that I felt. I didn't feel anything really for my victims, for my family, for anyone. That's when I decided to leave. Journalists play an essential, indispensable role in our world. And I think that role is even more important with the advent of fake news and artificial intelligence. Responsible, balanced, neutral journalism has always been important. I didn't look back. I don't regret it for a minute. And yet I hold with tremendous esteem the photojournalists who continue to inform us through visual storytelling.
As we've seen, the Israel-Hamas war is the most dangerous conflict for media in recent history. The UN Secretary General had this to say about the death toll.
Troubled by the number of journalists that have been killed in these conflicts. Freedom of press is a fundamental condition for the people to be able to know what's really happening everywhere in the world.
Journalists in Gaza say the high death toll makes every report they do vital. But as more die among their ranks and the war expands, their ability to deliver the news is rapidly decreasing. Here's VOA correspondent Heather Murdoch.
Many journalists inside Gaza now live here in Rafah, near the border with Egypt, where the population has grown more than 5 times since the war began in October. And Gaza residents continue to flee to Rafah as Israeli armed forces move south. Journalists working here say every story could be their last, but then again, so could every trip to the market to find food or fuel, to a hospital to search for missing, injured, or dead loved ones, or even to bed every night.
The situation in Gaza is very difficult, and covering Gaza is very difficult. A person can be killed by reporting any news or images for broadcast.
Depending on who is counting, the number of journalists killed in more than 4 months of war between Israel and Hamas varies. But all accounts show that the death toll for journalists is higher than in any other war in recent history. The Committee to Protect Journalists reports 85 deaths, while the United Nations says 122. Journalists inside Gaza say the number has risen to 130 since the last time anyone published a count. Mortaja says the increasing difficulty of reporting from Gaza has made every bit of information they can publish more crucial to the world's understanding of the war from the point of view of the people in Gaza.
By restricting journalists and reducing their mental strength, they can stop journalists from delivering the news professionally. But when they kill a journalist, it also increases our determination to continuously deliver the story and the truth.
The Israeli government has banned the international press from entering Gaza. And in December, the Foreign Press Association in Jerusalem petitioned the Israeli Supreme Court for access beyond tightly controlled military tours. The court denied the petition, saying it would cause an undue burden on the Israeli Defense Forces. Inside Gaza, reporters say their ability to deliver the news is rapidly diminishing.
It's a war from all directions on journalists and on the whole community. The Israeli occupation frequently cuts communications as part of their assault, reducing our capacity to get information from the restricted locations that we were forced to flee from in the north.
The Israeli government has said repeatedly that it does not target journalists or other civilians, a claim international rights groups and Palestinian journalists dispute. Reporting with Nadal Hamdouna and Amjad Tantesh in Rafah, Gaza, Heather Murdoch, VOA News, Istanbul.
That's all for this week. Thanks for watching The Inside Story. For the latest news, you can log on to voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News. For all your press freedom related content, you can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Jessica Jareen. Catch up on past episodes at our free streaming service, VOA+. We'll see you next week for The Inside Story.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain, and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Myanmar's media navigates risks to deliver news amid conflict. Welcome to VOA Asia Weekly. I'm Chris Casquejo in Washington. That story's coming up, but first, making headlines. Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto declared victory in Indonesia's presidential election as unofficial tallies positioned him well ahead of his running opponents. More than 200 million people registered to vote in Indonesia. There was no declaration by electoral officials, and the two former provincial governors who also contested the election in the world's third largest democracy have not conceded defeat. The U.S. Senate passed a $95.3 billion aid package early Tuesday for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, with 22 Senate Republicans supporting the bill, joined by almost all Democrats. The House now awaits the bill. House Speaker Mike Johnson criticized the measure for lacking border security provisions, but said he's keeping his options open. Indian farmers demanding guaranteed price support for their crops blocked highways and railroads Thursday. They clashed with police as officers fired tear gas as protesters marched toward New Delhi. The protest renews a movement from 2 years ago that succeeded in getting Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government to repeal contentious new agricultural laws. Former Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra has been granted parole after serving 6 months in a 1-year prison sentence. News reports from Thailand said the 74-year-old was on a list of 930 prisoners being granted early release because they are either ill or over age 70. Myanmar's junta is enforcing a law requiring the military to summon all men aged 18 to 35 and women aged 18 to 27 to serve in the military for at least 2 years. Those who ignore the draft can be jailed for the same period. 3 years into Myanmar's military rule, the country's journalists are rebuilding newsrooms in exile and finding ways to keep sources safe while accessing news about the conflict between the junta and the resistance movement. VOA News has the story narrated by Arash Arabasadi.
On the third anniversary of Myanmar's coup, the streets of the country's largest city, Yangon, are quiet, save for a military presence. Citizens are encouraged to stay inside for a silent protest. But in the country's north, a resistance movement is fighting back. The fighting has displaced millions of civilians, including journalists at Democratic Voice of Burma, or DVB. But from newsrooms outside of Myanmar, they keep reporting. Exile is not new for DVB, founded in 1992 in Norway under prior junta rule. The broadcaster moved to Myanmar during civilian rule, only to have to flee again in 2021. But experience hasn't made the job easier.
It's harder, in fact, because we had to rebuild everything.
With access to independent news restricted in Myanmar, DVB and other media now working from exile play a vital role.
I think the media become crucial, countering fake news and also countering propaganda, telling the truth about the situation on the ground.
To get news on the conflict, DVB relies on a large network of citizen journalists on the ground, without whom it says it is nearly impossible to get verified information. In Thai cities like Chiang Mai, some news outlets use exile as a shield. Frontier Myanmar's team takes on stories that are harder to cover inside the country, but nothing is guaranteed.
We have all the security protocols, online, offline, and personal security protocols that we follow.
Mementos and photographs adorn Frontier's walls, a reminder of its work's importance. And awards are also displayed at DVB, small reminders of the lives and loved ones left behind.
We try not to communicate with our family member inside Burma, because that can be a trace.
From exile, these outlets remain a key source of independent news. For VOA News in Thailand, Arash Arabasadi.
Visit voanews.com for the most up-to-date stories. I'm Chris Casquejo. And finally, love is in the air, but not quite yet for everyone. An ancient pagoda in central Hanoi received many young visitors on Wednesday who hoped a Valentine's Day offering would help them find a partner. Marriage and family are traditionally important in Vietnam, so many people are turning to Buddha for help. Thanks for watching VOA Asia Weekly.
Hi, this is Larry London. Welcome to Border Crossings, your station for music, artists, great new sounds, and innovators. And today we have two innovators. We've got Annie and Louisa, who are here with us, and they are Grief Cat. That's the name of the band. They have a brand new album coming out on April 19th, which is called Late Stage Capitalism. We'd like to welcome Annie and Louisa. Grief Cat, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
First of all, Grief Cat, what is that? What's that about? It's not a happy sounding name. What's going on there?
It's a bittersweet name. So it's based on the German concept of Kummerspeck, which I may be mispronouncing. It's a German word that translates literally to grief bacon, or the weight one gains from emotional eating. A few years back, I had a pretty tough breakup, and I was like, and so I got a cat. So a grief cat is the cat that you get after a breakup.
I love it. I love it. See, those personal stories people don't know unless they ask. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So you have this new album coming out. Is this your first album, or how many albums have you put out so far?
This will be our second album, but our first album came out during the spring of 2020, and I think something kind of was going on in the world. So
I think so, yeah.
Didn't come out to much fanfare. We are very excited about, not that that album's not great, but we are definitely excited about this one.
Something about the virtual experience was still beneficial because artists could interact with fans around the world, you know, and meet new people virtually, which you can't really do if you're on stage in a certain venue somewhere.
This is true, but for our music, we love, communicating. The way we communicate with our audience is through laughter, of course. And so when we're playing a funny song to a screen and we're not getting that feedback, it can kind of be like, okay, hope this is good. So we're very excited to do this live.
How did you guys get together? I think you were at separate artists at a talent show or something?
We were, yeah. So it was in 2015. So we played a variety show. So there were comedians, there were musicians, and we were both the two musicians at that show. And Annie had a song called Hot Park Ranger. I had a song called Barista Boyfriend. And we were like, wow, we both really like hot people with jobs. And we just really felt a connection at that point.
Hot people with jobs.
Yeah, it's good to have a type.
Those are rare to find these days.
Yeah, this is me.
So we're talking with Grief Cat, and you guys like to wear the same outfit, so people aren't seeing, the wrong thing. They are seeing two girls wearing the same clothing. Is this is your trademark? This is something you do all the time, I assume.
Oh, yes. Louisa is definitely our costume finder out there. She's built a lot of relationships with a lot of great people who make a lot of great clothes. And I'm just along for the ride because I love wearing them.
And I was going to ask, do you design your own clothing, or do you have someone design it for you?
Not yet.
Not yet. That's a goal. So if anybody wants to call us, we're actively seeking sponsorship. Hello.
Now, you write songs that could be construed. I mean, obviously, as an artist or artiste, you take yourself seriously, but you write songs that are not necessarily of serious nature. Not all your songs, but many of your songs include subject matter like poop.
Yes.
Or bank account, to get into somebody's bank account. So do you consider yourselves to be like parody songwriters, or no? It just happens to be those songs are funny?
I'd say we're songwriters. I mean, we identify primarily as musicians much more than comedians. And even if we're singing about poop, for example, like there's typically a point to it or a wit to it. Sometimes it can just be stupid and fun, but 80% of the time there is a deeper message there. So even that song about poop is really about late stage capitalism, which is the album, and kind of income inequality and all those things. So there's a lot that goes into it.
It's about pooping on the company dime so that you can take back, what's yours.
Yeah, I read that it's called Revolution Poop at Work. So very interesting title, but you had several big name titles like Crypto Bro, I Just Want to Get Inside Your Bank Account, and quite a few others as well. 25 million streams or views is huge. That's a massive number. Did you ever think in 2018 when you got together that you would be looking at millions of anything?
Honestly, it was a dream, and I can't believe we're here. So it's pretty delightful. Hashtag poop cells.
Poop cells. Yes, it's great to have you guys on the show. We'll get more into the story of Grief Cat, but first let's listen to a song. What are you going to do for us first?
Why don't let's do Revolution Poop at Work to start, because that's been the hot topic. So
all right.
Revolution Poop at Work.
All right, here we go. This is Border Crossings.
I took a dump at work. I pooped on the company dime. I took a dump at work. I do it all the time. The boss man takes my freedom and creativity. The least he can do is when I poo. Pay me when I take a dump at work. No one knows where I am. I take a dump at work. It's how I stick it to the man. The billionaires, they don't really care, they just see their bottom line. They pay my bills, so it's a little thrill to take my bottom time. Do-de-do-do-do. Do-de-do-do-do-do. Do-de-do-de-do-de-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Scat, 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 scat. Do-de-do-de-do-de-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So take a dump at work and poop on the company dime and do your part for the revolution. One poop at a time. The working class will rise again. We'll get what we deserve. But until that day, comrade, collect your pay and poop while you're at work.
Border Crossings, Revolution Poop at Work. And, well, it says it all. I mean, so the album, the new album, which is Late Stage Capitalism, I'm using a lot of political nuances and references and things. Are you girls political? Are you very into politics these days? And
I think I would use my father's term of politically adjacent. I don't think either of us have strong inclinations to run for office or to, represent anybody who needs representing, but we would like to contribute to the conversation by using our voices through art and songwriting.
Yeah, and we're a very values-driven band, and I think our values are part of what really ties us together, despite having different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think makes you guys different than everything else out there?
Well, there are a lot of wonderful, fantastic comedic bands and comedic duos that we definitely take a lot of inspiration from. I think what makes us different is that we do have political leanings, perhaps inclinations in our songs. Like you have to sift through the lyrics to get to a deeper meaning. And also the musicality is there. There's a lot of very funny music out there, but it doesn't always sound great. And one of our favorite compliments after a show is people saying, I laughed harder than I have in so long, but you guys sound amazing. And it's like, we know.
Yeah.
That's great. Grief Cat is our guest here on Border Crossings. And so this country's never been more divided than it is now. And, the political divide's getting larger and larger every day. So how do you balance that when you're writing songs that are of a political nature?
That is a great question.
So we had a very interesting concert very early on in our career where we played these songs to an audience that was not particularly receptive because they perhaps leaned to a different political persuasion. And right before we went on stage, we could kind of sense that was how the crowd was. And Luis and I looked at each other and we were like, we're just going to play our songs and you can kind of take it or leave it. We know we're not for everybody. Nobody is for everybody, but we're not going to edit ourselves or soften ourselves just so we can get more applause. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of been our MO as we've gone through our career.
Yeah. And I will say at that particular show, there's often somebody there that it does resonate with. So we actually built a super fan at that show.
Yes.
Like right after that show, she invited everybody she knew to like our Facebook and Instagram page, for example. Like it was just,
you
brilliant.
never know who you're playing for. So
Right.
don't for yourself.
It's a perfect example of the divide that we have, that, you know, half the room loved it, half the room wasn't so excited about it. But that's the nature of the beast. Now, what kind of subjects do you kind of enter into your music? What are some of the things you're singing about?
Gosh, we sing about a lot of things, multi-level marketing, and how that can be a little bit predatory. We sing about identity theft. We've got a few songs about identity theft and fraud.
Wow.
What else, Annie?
And the environmental movement.
Yes.
Cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Corporations.
Being naked and wearing socks, and how that feels different than just being naked.
It's true. It feels more naked.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers tried that once upon a time.
Oh yeah. I don't think they were wearing the socks correctly.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't put the socks on their feet. Exactly.
It was more of a modesty thing, I guess.
So for the songwriting, is one of you the principal songwriter, or is this always a collaborative thing, or how does the process work for Grief Cat?
It's definitely collaborative.
Yeah, I think sometimes it goes like a little bit in waves as well. So like one of us might have an idea that we'll push forward. But really when we're at our best is when we get into a room, we start playing music together, and we just start improvising, and one of us says something, the other one laughs, and then we just kind of build from there, because that's when we know we kind of have something.
All right. Well, let's listen to another song from Grief Cat. What are you going to do next?
This one is called I Just Want to Get Inside Your Bank Account.
All right. Here they are, Grief Cat. This is Border Crossings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Okay. Hello. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hey boy, I know that we just met, but I wanna know the name of your first pet. I really like you. I know that this sounds dumb, but can you spell exactly the city where you come from? Hey boy, I'm just trying to get to know you. Tell me, what high school did you go to? I really like you. I think that you're the bomb. But can you tell me the maiden name of your mom? 'Cause I just want to get inside your bank account. What? Your bank account. No, I just want to get inside your bank account. Oh, your heart. Your bank account. I want to get inside of your hearts. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, try it again. It's a love song. Hey, sexy, I want to steal your heart away, but also sexy. How much do you get paid? Ooh, ha, ha. That's a funny story about your dad. What was his first name again? Is that a capital B in Brad? I'd wish for you if I had a genie in a bottle. Tell me your first car's make and model. You are the full package, yes, I mean the total. Oh, baby, tell me the last 4 digits of your social. 'Cause I just want to get inside your bank account. Just you and me. Your bank account. And your identity. Oh, I just want to get inside your bank account. And your mind. Your and your bank soul, account. And your 401k. I just want to get inside your bank account. Why would I do that? Your bank account. I swear I'm not a criminal. I just want to get inside your bank account. Your bank account, don't call the FBI.
Border Crossings. I just want to get inside your bank account. And that's a new song from Grief Cat, which is doing very, very well. So It's safe to assume that money was the motivation of that particular song.
For me, it was more like data privacy and cybersecurity. But then it went into that kind of love direction as well. So it's kind of a, what are we really after? So
yeah, because on any first date, you're trying to get to know the person, but if you really paid attention to that information, you could do some damage.
We've got Annie and Louisa. They are Grief Cat, and we're thrilled to have them on the show talking about the new album, which is coming out April 19th. It's called Late Stage Capitalism. And so that name is a very political message right there in and of itself. Is that the title of any of the songs on the album, or is that just you picked that to be the album title?
Yeah, no, that's not the name of any song on the album, but it's definitely the theme of the album of how capitalism infiltrates every aspect of our lives, even, going on dates, even thinking about your carbon footprint, even just going about your day-to-day life. And so all those songs on the album have to do with that concept of being in a time where capitalism feels a little intense.
Yeah. Some of the songs are more of a stretch than others. But
True. And so you'd also do love songs and ballads as well?
We do. We do. So on our previous album, we have a ballad called like Leading Lady. That's really kind of serious and lovely. And then we also had
another song called Bandana.
Yeah.
But even on this coming album, even though it's more funny, Crypto Bro is definitely a ballad. It just happens to be about breaking up with somebody because they got too involved with cryptocurrency.
It's true.
And so what was the name of the first album?
It's just self-titled.
Yeah.
Oh, self-titled, Grief Cat. Okay. And you both live in the DMV.
We do,
Virginia specifically, but you are, in this area.
That's
and
right,
so very familiar with the area. And, and obviously that has to impact your writing, because here we can't in DC avoid politics. We're broadcasting to 100 different countries right now around the world. And so a lot of countries have their own political battles and challenges and don't necessarily relate to, the Bitcoin issue or things that we sing about or talk about. But, it'd be interesting. Are you going internationally? Are you going to tour internationally? Is that included in your plan?
That is the dream. So that's something that we're actively looking into. So if anybody, wants us in your city, just reach out to us. We'll answer you on Instagram. We do have a couple other shows coming up as well. So I know that we've got quite a few things in February, but we're mostly touring around like Virginia. We might be going to Pennsylvania as well. And then in April, we have our album release show on April 21st at Jam and Java in Vienna, Virginia.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
great.
we have one very big show. It's not just going to be us. We're going to have a backing band. We're going to have games. We're going to have prizes. It will be a very exciting, big show.
Very big.
Big show, which will include a ukulele, I read.
Oh, yes. Always ukulele.
Who plays the ukulele? That the band or what you
That
do?
was me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great. What other instruments do you guys play?
It's usually just ukulele and guitar, and we try and stick to those two because they're very portable.
It's true.
I want to play one more song. We have time for one more song. So what are we going to do next?
We're going to do Crypto Bro.
That's right.
Yes, our country ballad.
All right. Crypto Bro. Here are Grief Cat on Border Crossings.
You and I, we were gonna be forever, spending our whole lives together. That's how it was supposed to be. And you and I, we were gonna build something special, and maybe start a family and settle. That used to be our dream. But you threw it all away the day I found out that you became a crypto bro. You're not the man I fell for so long ago. I used to understand you, but I don't know anything about NFTs. Oh, crypto bro, I know I've been replaced now, so I will go. I hope that you enjoy being all alone, you and your cryptocurrency. Oh, crypto bro.
Sing it, Louisa.
And I tried,
she tried
to make this thing work, then I realized turned our garage to a Bitcoin mine.
What is that?
I don't know what that means.
She doesn't know what that means.
And I tried,
she tried.
Listen, will you would explain what happens on the blockchain?
What is that?
I don't know what that means.
Nobody knows what that means.
We had a good thing, you knew it. But you went ahead and you blew it. Yeah, you blew it on crypto, bro. You're not the man I fell for so long ago. I used to understand you, but I don't know anything about NFTs. Oh, crypto bro, I know I've been replaced now, so I will go. I hope that you enjoy being all alone, you and your cryptocurrency. How can I put my trust in someone who loves Elon Musk? I can't do it.
She can't do it, no.
And there's no future for you and me in your mythical future economy. So I will say this, crypto bro, remember when you told me you'd love me so? Remember all those moments when time would slow? They're nothing more than a memory. Key change, crypto bro. I know I've been replaced now, so I will go. I hope that you enjoy being all alone, you and your cryptocurrency. Oh, crypto bro. Oh, yeah.
Border Crossings, and that's called Crypto Bro. And for those that may or may not know that cryptocurrency was one of, it's a thing here in America anyway, and around the world, I think, in other countries. But I'm not really into it. I don't know too much about it. Cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that is the point of the song, is that your partner got so wrapped up into something you have nothing in common anymore.
Now, you had mentioned earlier that you went through a time of grief. You went through a time of depression, sadness. You were in a difficult place. Mental health is now, at the forefront of our minds. We're talking about it a lot more. We're addressing it a lot more. What advice would you give to a younger person who might be experiencing a similar rut in life?
Therapy and medication has done wonders for me.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a fan.
Oh, there's the grief cat.
Come here, sir. All right.
There's the grief cat.
But also find your creative outlet. I think there's only so much that, those sorts of wonderful things can do for somebody experiencing a mental health challenge. When you have an outlet, you can really, process things that you didn't even know needed processing.
Yeah. And I would say animals can also be really helpful.
Animals are wonderful.
So this guy lays on me all night. He's really been incredible.
Yeah, animals are great support, emotional support, mental health support. It's great to have. I've got 3 dogs at home, so I know that
Oh, wow.
having animals around is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. Too bad they're not part of our lives for very long. It's too short. But
That's the hard part.
Grief Cat. On that note, Grief Cat is the name of the artist, and the cameo by the cat. Which the cat's name is Grief Cat.
His name is Marvin.
Marvin. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hello, Marvin. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. Where do people go to find out more information about this upcoming special announcement and more information about you guys and getting your music?
So I would say following us on Instagram is a great spot to start. So on Instagram, we are at Grief Cat Party Time. At Grief Cat was taken by a cool goth girl in Malaysia a while back. So we are Grief Cat Party Time on Instagram. We're also Grief Cat on Facebook, Grief Cat on Bands in Town. We've got griefcat.com. Spotify. Following us on Spotify is a big one too. So but
great.
definitely keep in touch. We're very responsive.
Yes. Well, that's wonderful. So make sure you reach out to Grief Cat. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. It's a pleasure talking to both of you, Annie and Louisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Such
for
a
having
pleasure.
us.
Grief Cat has been our guest today on the show, and it's Late Stage Capitalism out on April 19th. So pick up a copy of that album wherever records are sold. So thank you for watching Border Crossings, and thanks again to Grief Cat. My name is Larry London, and this is Border Crossings on VOA TV.
A series of dams, reservoirs, and legal agreements has turned the Colorado River into a highly complex water system, supporting over 40 million people in the American Southwest. 7 U.S. states, 2 Mexican states, and 30 tribal nations all have rights to the river's waters. The system depends on precisely timed releases from the 2 largest reservoirs in the United States, Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Now the extremes of climate change are making river management even more challenging. Edith Zagona leads the University of Colorado team that developed Riverware, a program that models how the river will function under different scenarios.
We've zoomed in and we can see the very important Lake Powell, and it contains the physical processes and then also all of the data associated with Lake Powell.
Climate predictions, evaporation rates, power generation, and all the other factors that impact the river on its journey are included in the model. The federal agency managing the river uses Riverware to run scenarios, such as how the river will perform in a bad drought year.
What is the reliability of Lake Powell being able to release its water to those very needy water users downstream?
Getting all the water users to agree on how to share can be difficult. Most stakeholders now use Riverware, and the common platform has helped ease some negotiations.
If we can at least agree to the facts, and that's what happened when we started working with Mexico. They had their system, we had ours. We started getting together, putting models together. It's important.
The software is also helping decision makers on other rivers, from the Columbia to the Nile. Matt Dibble, VOA News, Boulder, Colorado.
In Russia, prison officials say jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny has died at a prison camp in Siberia. Navalny was a pro-democracy activist and sharp critic of President Vladimir Putin. European leaders express concern over the reported death of Navalny. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he was saddened and disturbed by the report. In Hong Kong, customs officials working with India uncover a $1.7 billion transnational criminal money exchange business based in India. And Japan's government says the country unexpectedly entered a recession in late 2023 as spending slowed.
According to United Nations, there are over 600 million persons with disabilities worldwide. Of these, 400 million live in developing countries and 80 million in Africa. But inclusion in education or labor force continues to be a challenge for them. Hello everyone and welcome to Our Voices. I am Simani Shekoye and I'm joined by my co-hosts Oriane Itangishaka and Ginny Niwa. Today, we'll be talking about employment disparity for persons with disabilities in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly for women. Hello, ladies.
Hello, hello.
So I was researching for this and I saw a data from ILO, the International Labour Organization, that, for example, in Senegal, 78% of the youth with disabilities are not either in employment, education, or training. And I was so shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked knowing on the continent what we see when we look at people with disabilities. We either say they're bewitched, we either say, you know, for the most part. But what worries me a lot is always, like I said, the culture of shining upon them. And that culture is moving so slow in seeing that we need to accommodate them. And the lack of accommodation will bleed into the laws that we make, the lack of provision that we make for them to be able to enter into the workforce, meaning we won't be able to build ramps for them, for their wheelchairs, we won't be able to build elevators, we won't be able, because of the culture that we have, a mindset that we have that they're not part of society. So that's my worry.
It's in everything we do, right?
Yes, I do. You know what? I believe that this society, even modern society, was not made with people with disability in mind. They're probably the most marginalized community in the world. And like you say, on the continent, even culturally, they're not accepted, whether it's, you know, the culture or financial, you know, they see it as a burden. So, and we're going to talk about it later, some, you know, disability, they're not even visible. So if their voice is not, you know, raised,
Exactly. And again, I mean, in the data I saw, for example, in Ethiopia, over 8 million people live with disabilities. But because of everything we talked about, the misconception, because of not being included, lack of inclusion, most of them live in poverty. You'll see a lot of disabled people begging on the street, living below poverty line, right? And this exposes them to a lot of, negative behaviors, depression, anxiety. So this is what we'll be talking about today. Well, more than 80 million persons with disabilities live in Africa, according to the United Nations. This includes mental health conditions as well as physical impairments. But due to negative assumptions, misconceptions, and traditional or religious beliefs, persons with disabilities continue to face exclusion, discrimination, and are proportionally more likely to live in poverty. According to the World Bank, women experience higher rates of disability than men due to unequal levels of protections and rights. Disability and gender then interact to create greater discrimination and multiple disadvantages for women with disabilities compared to men with disabilities. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we'll discuss key obstacles to disability inclusion in the workplace. We will also explore why it's especially important to include women with disabilities in decision-making while fostering inclusion of talented people with disabilities.
Well, let's first go to Kenya and meet Diane Ayo, a mother who struggled to find a safe space in the Kenyan capital for her daughter who has a neurological disorder. So she opened one of her own. Now, Ayira's Neuro Soul Cafe not only welcomes people with cognitive conditions such as autism, but also employs them and educates the public on neurodiversity. Victoria Amunga reports from Nairobi.
18-year-old Natasha Mwangi's efforts to find a job were futile until a month ago when she got a job here. Natasha, who was born with cerebral palsy, welcomes guests at this cafe that offers jobs to people with neurological disorders.
I'm happy and at the same time excited. Thank you.
Ayira's Neurosoul Cafe is the first of its kind in Kenya. The owner, Diana Ayo, says the name is derived from her now 5-year-old daughter, Ayira, born neurodivergent.
More and more I get parents approaching me and asking me, can my child come and work for you, even if it's for free? I will even pay you. And I told them that is not the essence. My essence is to empower them so that the society, not only Diana can absorb them, but other people can.
Guests at the cafe are also educated on neurodiversity and how to interact with neurodiverse adults and children, including through art.
You're just seeing this person for who they are beyond any extremities that they have or anything that they might, about them that might be different.
Common neurological disorders include autism, dyslexia, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD, and cerebral palsy, among others. These conditions are triggered by genetic predisposition and events during pregnancy. According to the US-based Center for Neurodiversity and Employment Innovation, unemployment for people with such neurological disorders runs as high as 40%. Experts say that in Kenya, lack of understanding and proper education is locking out many highly talented individuals out of the job market.
Having transitioned maybe the education system where their unique and very unique needs were not taken into consideration, then there's a very high likelihood that they will end up also not having their potentials and capacities fully identified and picked, and then this goes now to limit what we are talking about, the working space.
Neurodiversity is an understudied and underreported field, especially in Africa, according to the Neurodiversity Center. Diana hopes efforts such as this will help to educate and sensitize the public. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Well, that's a very impressive initiative and exemplary. There are national, regional, and international laws that advocate and protect employment for individuals with disabilities in the workforce. However, they continue to be denied the right to work. So to understand why there continues to be such a huge employment gap, we invited Louise Atta, founder and CEO of Network of Women with Disabilities. Born and raised in Nigeria, Ms. Atta was affected by polio when she was only 2 years old, causing her paralysis. But she says she sees her disability as a bridge, but not as a barricade. She is now a disability rights advocate, and she founded Network of Women with Disabilities in 2009 to include women with disabilities in national policies and agendas. Ms. Atta, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much. So let's go right into it. You talk about 3 types of barriers stopping people with disabilities to be included in the workforce, like attitudinal, infrastructural, and institutional. Can you expand on them? What are exactly these barriers?
Yes, the issue of attitudinal barrier against persons with disabilities means that people tend to see their disabilities first before their abilities or before the human being that uses wheelchairs, that uses guide cane, hearing aid, and crutches. We have 99.9 abilities in us, but the public sector, the private sector, and generally, people believe in seeing their disabilities first before their abilities. So we need character reform. We need to change our attitudes towards persons with disabilities. Let's treat them as human beings before anything else. And for institutional, we have legal frameworks locally and internationally, but these legal frameworks are not being prioritized when it comes to implementation strategies. We forget about the rights of persons with disabilities. We forget about bringing them to participate in every sector of the economy. And when we talk about the infrastructural barrier, we're talking about the inaccessibility of buildings, workplaces, churches, mosques, schools, parks and gardens, and everywhere. We need to make everywhere inclusive and accessible, including our schools. Children with disabilities need to enjoy teaching in every classroom when facilities are provided. Braille materials are there, ramps are there, inclusive toilets are there, accessible classrooms, and the teachers also understand the needs and the challenges of her pupils and students. So these major barriers are stopping persons with disabilities from practicing their rights.
These are definitely major barriers, and I always really, like I said in the beginning, look at attitudinal barriers. But you know, we know that in many reports, discrimination against women with disability is more than it is towards men with disabilities, and that's a double discrimination. What have you been doing exactly in your organization since 2019 when you opened up to try to empower them and to advocate for them specifically?
Yes, you know, as women and girls with disabilities, we are treated as third-class citizens. We are triple jeopardized in every developing country. We are seen as women, yes. Secondly, women with disabilities. And lastly, the barriers from the society. The society is not friendly to us.
Right.
So far, we have done some interventions programs in network of women with disabilities. One of them was called Inclusion Works Project, supported by FCDO in partnership with Inclusive Futures through the Site Savers here in Nigeria. It's a consortium of 11 organizations in 4 countries, in Kenya, Uganda, and Bangladesh.
And that's sorry to interrupt, but it's good that you mentioned that. You also mentioned earlier, you know, reform, and there are many laws and regulations that ensure equitable access to all persons, whether disabled or not. Why are these laws not ensuring equal access to education and employment to people with disability? And please tell us, how is it in Nigeria?
Yes. In Nigeria, Article 24 is about education. Article 27 is about inclusive employment opportunities according to United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. These articles have given us the right to participate actively as citizens with disabilities. But in Nigeria, we are still at a 0% level of participation. particularly for women and girls with disabilities. We have been excluded, left behind, underrepresented, and discriminated in many sectors. It's good for the men and men with disabilities, but it's not good for women and girls with disabilities. We are highly differentialized, and we are saying no to this because we have the capacity, we have the competency, we have the character to contribute our quota to the development of our country. So we want all the policy makers, decision makers, to see the potential that lies.
Thank you, Miss Ota. Unfortunately, we have to go, but thank you for your, for the work that you're doing. I think now we're getting a better understanding. So thank you so much, Miss Ota, for joining us. Miss Louise Ota is the founder and CEO of Network of Women with Disabilities. It's now time for a break, but we'll continue our conversation on ways to empower children, women, and other people with disability in order to help them become productive members of society. We also love to hear from you on social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, and our handle is at VOA Africa. Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back, and you are tuned into Our Voices, and we are discussing disability inclusion in the workplace and why it matters. Types of disability vary from person to person. While some are visible to the eye, others, such as mental health conditions or intellectual disability, may not be necessarily obvious on the surface. To discuss how workplaces can recognize all disabilities, empower, and engage them in the most effective way, we invited Ms. Veronica Amarty, founder and chief executive officer to the Challenged Foundation. The Challenged Foundation is a non-governmental organization that focuses in making the voice of persons with disability clearly heard in society. They also assist persons with disabilities achieving educational and training workshops. Ms. Amarty, thank you so much for joining us via Skype from Germany.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, so when it comes to employment, I noticed there are some misconceptions by employers, such as they are not productive, they are not cost effective, or they are liable. So how do you engage organizations or hiring managers to change such kind of misconceptions?
Well, thank you for the question. in one of your discussions a while ago, somebody was mentioning the fact that people see the disability of persons with disabilities rather than their capabilities. And so we have been advocating that persons with disabilities must be given employment on merit, not on sympathy basis. So we've been using our social media platforms to do advocacy for employers to unlearn the fact that, persons with disabilities, their capabilities must be seen, not like they are given employment because we sympathize with them. And so I think that companies must offer also to be able to improve inclusion of persons with disabilities in the workplace. Companies must offer accessible infrastructure and technology. I've been saying that if we don't assess the building, how are we going to assess the jobs?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, for
So,
sure.
and sometimes you see that employers some of them are really willing to provide employment or to employ persons with disabilities.
That's very
but
good.
the structures are not accessible. Some time ago in Ghana, I went to look for a job in a disability organization. And so I went to do the interview and everything. And then later on, I was denied the job based on the fact that the building was not accessible.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the accessibility is always a big issue. But before we continue with this conversation, let's listen to business people from the continent. Our reporter, Fahad Sebagala, talked to women in Uganda's capital, Kampala. And we have Halima Namazi Kizito, Oliver Nwanko, Zainab Mukedi in our Your Voice segment, and we'll be right back.
As regards to a yes, when you hire a disabled person, it would sort of attract other people with disabilities to come in the spa and also take care of themselves. Because most times, disabled people have a bit of inferiority complex about them. So they tend to shield themselves away from everything that concerns maybe self-care and everything else. So if I hired a disabled person, it would sort of attract them to come and work on themselves.
And why? It's simply because at LAPER, we have a policy and a culture that is based on meritocracy, but also inequality. And I believe disabled people have the ability to prove to numerous people that they can do the job effectively and efficiently more than even people who have no disabilities. And I believe giving them the chance is also proving a point that we are human, and it's also part of no discrimination.
And the reason as to why I cannot employ a disabled person, it's just because of the business I'm doing. This business needs someone who's really very, very active. Now, for example, a client can move in, guy, he wants a ball, for example, then guy, that ball needs to be picked from the store. But if someone is really disabled, for example, guy, he's having over one leg, one arm, there is no way how he's going to be very speedy to go to the store to pick those things, to bring them to that client when that client is really very, very fast.
And for the no part, most of my work involves heavy lifting. Okay, I wouldn't call it heavy lifting, but it would be like some hard work. For example, the massages, the body presses, maybe the facials, a bit of sitting and working. So it all depends, but I would, yes.
Well, there are some jobs that they can do and some jobs that they can't do. Now, Ms. Amarty, how do you prepare them for specific jobs? What do you get them ready to do when they're trying to be employable?
All right, so what we are doing is, and we have actually started with a pilot project, we are trying to establish an employment and inclusion hub for these people. So we give them skill training, and we will gather them together. They produce this product so that we take the marketing aspect of it. We are going to collaborate with disability organizations and stakeholders, because you know that in a part of the world, persons with disabilities are stigmatized. And so sometimes people do not even want to patronize whatever services and products they, produce.
Right.
And we think that if the organization is at the forefront of whatever products and services they are producing, then we will engage the media, and so we will display these products in the public domain.
That's a good point, the public demand. But earlier you touched on building accessibility. Can you just tell us, how would a company benefit from promoting inclusion and diversity, and also what it means to be disability inclusive?
Okay, that will mean that providing an accessible environment for persons with disabilities. Otherwise, resources that they will usually not get. We make sure that they access buildings, they access jobs, they access, healthcare. Because if only yesterday I was doing a video where I was talking about healthcare services that should be subsidized. For instance, if I don't have my caliper, if I don't have my wheelchair, how do I go to work? It will be, of course, very difficult for me. So when we make all these things accessible to persons with disabilities, then that will mean that we are including them in every aspect of life.
Yeah. So earlier we were talking about there are laws and regulations that exist in many countries that promote inclusiveness, but how do we engage governments and different government structures to implement them, to reinforce them, these existing laws?
Yeah, I think this is very crucial if we really want to, create or promote diversity and equality. And so I think that navigating disability inclusion actually requires commitment from leadership, and also it should be an ongoing communication. And this involves willingness to adapt and evolve to meet the needs of all individuals within the organization. What I always say is that this is not a one-man job. It is a holistic responsibility. Everybody, including leaders, must get involved. But also, like I said earlier, it requires a commitment from leadership, and it should be an ongoing, communication effort.
That's a very good point to end. It's a holistic responsibility. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Veronica Amarty, on Our Voices. This is where we end our show. We thank our guests, Ms. Veronica Amarty, founder of the Challenged Foundation, and Ms. Louise Auta, founder and CEO of Network of Women with Disabilities, for joining us. Be sure to watch Our Voices on the VOA website at voaafrica.com, where you can catch up on the latest episodes and the world's top news stories. Now, on behalf of my co-hosts, editors, production team, and everyone here at the Voice of America, we will see you again next week with another exciting program. Be sure to continue the conversation on our social media platforms. Until then, thanks for tuning in. Cheers.